Mm. Okay. Hey everybody, it's Robbie. Welcome back to API Sec U USA chapter or K-Man Security. So today I'm going to kind of move along with my webinars. I'm trying to kind of go through like my ambassador program, kind of do different things. So today we're going to do a few things. We're going to talk about what is Recon and bug bounty hunting. And then we're going to go through like a live engagement in a bug bounty program through Integrity. So I just want to introduce myself. So for people who don't know, my name is Robbie. I'm from the United States, but I also kind of moved back and forth between Vietnam. I have my bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance. My specialty is I'm kind of into application security and malware. Recently, I've been dabbling into like AI. I also do conferences. I speak at conferences. I do workshops at universities. So my big ploy is I'm really into education. So hopefully in the future I can run my own training company or maybe become a professor at a university. Okay, so guys, all right. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start off with today's presentation. So if you guys are ready, let's get started. So let's talk about API recon for bug bounty hunters, finding APIs before finding vulnerabilities. So I think this is really important for many people because I think when we are kind of getting ready for engagement, we're wanting to get into bug bounty hunting, we're just kind of looking for bugs. So we don't really have a methodology. We're not really thinking about where to go or what to do. So it's a little unfortunate, but we're trying. So today we're going to kind of go through like kind of an idea, some checklists, some stuff like this. Okay. So why recon matters? I think this is something that people don't think about. So the biggest challenge in API security is often discovering the attack surface. So many times when people are trying to do bug bounty hunting, they're like I said, they're just running and looking for IDORs, BOLAs, BFLAs, stuff like this. So they don't really think about what the website is doing or what it's capable of, and that's kind of the big problem today. Okay, so some things to think about. APIs are everywhere. Many are undocumented. There's a lot of shadow APIs. Obviously people are just kind of building APIs and not documenting them. Developers forget old endpoints. This is very true. I've been in a software company. I'm a backend developer, and you don't know how many times I've seen just useless endpoints just hanging out. Attackers win by finding what defenders forget, and this is exactly right. So this is why when we think about earlier, we think about asset management and OWASP. This is very important because we have to have asset inventory. People may say, well, it's not necessary in like software or APIs, but reality it is because if we're missing an endpoint that we didn't delete or get rid of, then we're in big trouble. All right. So again, what is API recon? So it is the process of finding endpoints. It is looking for parameters, authentication methods, documentation. It's really cool to find some Swagger files because if you can find a Swagger file, you can find pretty much all the endpoints and how the functionality works. So I think it's very useful. Okay. Obviously, you can find some hidden functionality. Sometimes if you're using tools like Kaido, Burp Suite, you're going to find a lot of cool things inside the requests that you won't see on the front end. So that's why when you're doing like bug bounty hunting, sometimes it's better just to use like a web auditor tool. And then obviously you need to learn about the business workflow. What is the web application actually trying to do? Okay. So the biggest goal is you should try to create an inventory before testing. So this is the most important thing. Just because when you're in your engagement, you need to keep track of what you're doing, what kind of stood out to you, stuff like this. And if you don't have that inventory, you're going to be a little behind. Okay. So think about the recon mindset. I think this is something that people think about. They want to go up. They think about the hacker mindset. But the hacker mindset's cool, but you need to think about other things other than just finding vulnerabilities. So think about like I said, most beginners think about finding the vulnerability. That's like their first mission, right? But experienced hunters, they try to find the attack surface, they try to understand the functionality, stuff like this. So they're not really focused on the vulnerability because vulnerability will come later, right? Because when you start to go, oh, okay, look, I found a forums page, or maybe I found a place to add a comment or whatever, they're keeping that in mind. So then later when they're going through that process, they can see how the workflow will work, right? So think about the recon first before you think about the hacking. All right, so here's kind of a good recon workflow that I kind of like. So you should try to look at your target. You should try to find your subdomains. I think, kind of doing some domain enumeration is really, really important because a lot of times you will kind of skip endpoints or skip these things that really are important because, you never know. You might find a V1 functionality somewhere or a V2 and you might go, oh, I didn't think about this, or oh, I forgot about that, stuff like this. The biggest thing, look for documentation. Try to find that Swagger file, the Open API file, whatever. You don't know how valuable those are because not only will they show like some admin functions or some user functions, but you'll kind of understand more or less what the business is doing. So it'll kind of save you a lot of time if you can find it. And endpoints, obviously you want to find your endpoints, see what they're doing, kind of keep a list of those. Authentication, you need to know how things work, right? So like if they have a login page, does it require something with a bearer token? Are they using cookies? Different things like this. And then finally, your testing. Once you have all these things kind of documented, then it's important to get into testing because then you have kind of a more or less full scope of what you're doing, right? So let's kind of go into step one. So asset discovery. You want to find systems that likely expose APIs. So this is kind of important, right? So you want to kind of see what the web application is doing. Is there any APIs? What is there you can see? So some good examples are something like api.company.com, mobile.company.com, developer.com, partners.com. These are super important because these endpoints, these actually tell a lot of things. So like when I was doing a beta test for like TCM security, they were doing like the AI hacking exam. And one thing that I found interesting was I was able to get the AI to reveal the developer's endpoint. There's actually a specific endpoint for them. And I was like, wow. And that's actually dangerous because then I could brute force my way in. I can find some telling information. I can enumerate further. So, when we think about this asset discovery, it's boring. No one wants to do it. But once you have lay of the land, it becomes much easier. Okay, so get your asset discovery in order first. Okay. All right. So looking for clues for APIs. A lot of times people say, "Well, I don't know what is an API. I don't know how to look for an API." Well, there's a few keywords. So our first one is API. When you're looking at your HTTP request, sometimes you'll see something like /API/v1/blah blah blah. You see that word API? That's an API. It's clear as day. There's nothing too surprising about it. V1, V2, these are API versions, okay? So these are actually things that businesses use. V1 is the weakest, it's the oldest, it's the most vulnerable, okay? V2 is a little bit better. So, there's always that telling information with APIs. GraphQL, people are always interested in GraphQL vulnerabilities. You'll see that too. You'll see something like /GraphQL/user/dashboard, right? So when you see that, you know that that's a GraphQL, okay? So these are pretty clear when you're looking through actual endpoints. Okay, Swagger, obviously, like I said, you want to find that Swagger endpoint. Can I look at the information? Open API, same thing. It's just like the Swagger file. Kind of gives you all the functionality, endpoints, stuff like this. Developer, this is, more or less where people are, testing their vulnerabilities, testing things out, stuff like this, right? Mobile, so obviously this is kind of looking for mobile applications. So if you're into mobile hacking, this is something you'll see a lot. Partner, this is also important. So maybe you're using like APIs from different businesses or different organizations. Having like this partner endpoint is really useful because now people will say, okay, maybe I can do something like unsafe consumption, or I can manipulate the endpoint to do something dangerous. Okay, so a lot of times we want to find these hidden clues. All right, so let's talk about the Swagger a little bit. I talk about this a lot, but I think this is super important, okay? So, /Swagger, again, this is where like the documentation for APIs live. So if you're like needing to understand how the website works, how it functions, if you can find that Swagger file, it will show you everything. It'll show you like the login, it'll show you the search, it'll show you like adding, deleting, whatever that functionality in that website has, it will show it to you, everything. Now, they may not show you the admin stuff, but like for normal user stuff, it will. And that's more than enough to understand how the website is working, what it's doing, stuff like this. Okay, same thing, Swagger UI. So this is kind of the fancy version of it. So we want that. API docs, this is where, your API information lives. So you'll kind of see that information as well. OpenAPI.json. So this is, again, the same thing where We have the documentation for the API. This is where it lives, depending on what you're building. Are you building JavaScript, Go, whatever? These different functionalities have the different purposes. And then, of course, OpenAPI.yaml, same thing. Okay, so all these endpoints are directly related to API and the functionality of the web application. So you can find one of these, you're in good hands, really. I mean, if you can find that, dude, like it makes your life easier. Now, sometimes you may not, and there's going to be other tools you can use. But if your goal is to grab this and you can, you'll be good. Okay, Postman collections. This is it's actually very fun. So developers love Postman. For people who don't know what Postman is, it's an API auditor. So you're able to test the endpoint, log in, do everything through JSON formatting. It's kind of like curl, like it's just a really advanced version of curl. And it saves a lot of time. You can save the Swagger file, you can put all the endpoints in there, you can save your cookies, you can save your bearer tokens. It's really great. I used to actually, in my last company, I actually built like an automation circuit where I was actually able to log into the web application with the bearer token automatically when I logged into Postman. It's very cool. Was it dangerous? Yes, because unfortunately that group was using the same information for everybody. So if one person had it, it was like people were screwed. Okay. So again, think about the collection, the workspace, the API docs, everything lives inside Postman. That's why people like it so much. So you can get a hold of the Postman documentation. Oh, you're in good hands. You can find example requests. You can see how the requests work. That's the cool thing about Swagger files, API docs, all of it. You can more or less know how the website is functioning. Okay. Authentication details. Again, you find the bearer tokens, you find the cookies, you find how things work, the mechanisms are. You'll find everything. So Postman, people sit there and say, well, it's not that great. It is. It tells you a lot of information, and it's something that I think should be taken seriously. Okay, JavaScript Recon. I think this is where we start to get into like more advanced bug bounty hunting. But this is where we need to understand, what kind of information are we finding in JavaScript? Are we finding APIs, JSON files, whatever? So here's some really useful endpoints. We have API v1 users. Okay, so that's JSON, that's a JavaScript file, right? Or endpoint. API v1 profile. Again, we can find user profile. API v1 orders, same thing. So you kind of see more or less this v1. It's kind of telling it's going to be like more JavaScript oriented. So the more comfortable you feel looking at code, the more comfortable you feel looking at different syntax, the stronger you become. Okay, so this is something that I think you really should spend the time with. Go take a JavaScript course, go take some sort of coding course. Even if you don't code, the biggest goal is to be able to look at what you're looking at and know more or less what it's doing. You have to be an expert? No. But knowing the syntax, knowing how the elements function, knowing the layout of programming, it'll save you a lot of time and effort. Okay? All right, so I did this one, burping Kaido passive recon. So a lot of times, these tools can find endpoints, parameters, tokens, headers, hidden functionalities. So this is why a lot of bug bounty hunters, they live inside of Kaido or Burp Suite. I personally like Kaido the most because it's run in Rust, and Rust is really fast compared to Java. Java is really old, but they both are really great programs because they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you can still gather information very quickly. Actually, I probably would say that Burp is probably stronger because it does run its own automation crawling. You can actually crawl the website very quickly, and it does a good job. Kaido, I haven't really messed around with it too much, but you can go to the sitemap portion of Kaido, and you can click on everything, and it'll live in there. So either way, they're still both very good. It just depends on what purpose you have and what you feel comfortable with. Okay. So remember, key thing: observe before attacking. You don't want to just start attacking and find nothing, right? So we're going to do that today. We're actually going to go through live bug bounty hunting, and we're going to kind of take a look at that, okay? All right, browser developer tools. I think this is something that's been so powerful for me that I learned a lot this year. So, every browser has a functionality, right? So you can hit F12, or you can do inspect, whatever it is that your browser is using. And the things you want to look at, you want to look at network tabs. You want to look at fetch requests, the HTTP requests, everything. You can really look inside the sources as well, and you can find a ton of information. I think One functionality that I went one challenge I went through with BugForge was actually you found the JavaScript file and you were able to more or less know where the endpoints were, or how there was a hidden endpoint for like maybe like a booking appointment. It was really cool actually. So when you're looking through everything, don't think about tools. This is something that I really took back from Heath Adams a while back. If you don't know who Heath Adams is, he's the owner of TCM Security, or the Cyber Mentor. And you know what? I took his OSINT course, and one of the things that he taught about his OSINT course was, he said, look, he goes, OSINT is a really powerful technique, it's a very good skill, but if you're relying on tools rather than methodology, you will fail when your tools fail. And I think that's very true. So when you're doing like bug bounty hunting, sure, you can run Kaido, you can run FFUF, you can run all these cool tools, but maybe that tool will not exist tomorrow. Maybe that tool will go down. So the most important thing is you really need to understand methodology, because you can really do bug bounty hunting without tools, really. So think about methodology before doing the actual tooling, okay? So think about that. And remember, a lot of these different tools obviously can reveal APIs very quickly. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. It's going to be awkward. I think when people are getting into bug bounty hunting, they feel very frustrated, because looking at a real website or web application compared to like a challenge application, it's very different, because there's loads of information, loads of stuff, and it's just very stressful. So don't stress too much when you are fumbling your way through, because that's called experience. I think a lot of times when people are trying to get into it, they want to be perfect from the get-go. It's just like learning languages. I speak a couple languages myself. And, when I first started speaking Spanish, for example, I sucked at it. I was horrible at it for a couple months. But it took time, it took effort, and eventually I was making money speaking languages, right? So same thing with bug bounty hunting. You're going to be really awkward going through things. You're going to fumble things, especially if you're doing like lives like what I'm doing right now. Some people want to do live bug bounty huntings. Those are great, but that also adds a level of pressure, which is also good because it helps you to become more confident as you go through things in a live environment. But, don't try to stress out too much in these bug bounty huntings, because like the one we're going to do, it's a VDP. So meaning like, I'm not going to get any money if I find a vulnerability. So it's not like any pressure on my end, right? So don't think about the money. Don't think about the reward. Think about the skill first, because once you are very comfortable with the methodology, the money and the fame and the reputation, those come later. They follow through with it, right? So mobile APIs, I'd like to talk about this. So this is huge in bug bounty. Obviously, people don't really touch mobile applications because it's advanced. There's more tools you need to use to be able to observe mobile applications. But I will actually show that later in APISec University, because no one's really doing it, and I'm going to, because I think that APISec University is a very broad spectrum. So, you can get into mobile application, you can get into AI, you can get into web application. So my goal is to cover all that. Okay. So some things you can look at, same thing. You have your API, V1, login, profile, account, same thing, just like a web application. So many times the format doesn't matter, because you're going to follow the same methodology, right? So some tools you may use, MobSF, which is kind of like also used for malware analysis. APK tools that shows the actual program. JADX, this actually will show you the binaries, the programming, everything. So these tools are something that I actually use myself, and very, very valuable, okay? But right now we're not going to get into that. All right, so understanding authentication. Things you should ask yourself, does it have JWT? Does it have cookies? Does it have API keys? Does it have OAuth? Does it have no authentication? You'd be surprised at what websites have and don't have, right? So the more you understand that, and the more you understand the functionality of the authentication, the better you will be. Because a lot of times you may just be able to do an API request without a bearer token or without a session cookie, sometimes you need it. So sometimes when you're logging in, grab that authentication token, because you may use it later and you may bypass something that you didn't know you could bypass. So think about how it works and what they're doing with it. All right, understand business logic. So this is something that I really learned from Alex Olson. He's the original creator of TCM Securities. web application pathway. He did like the PWPP, he did the PWPE. He didn't do the PWP, unfortunately, but he really created a great methodology for web application testing. And he's also now the owner of bugforge.io, where he creates daily web application challenges. I love this man because he went through the same thing. He said, look, understand business logic before applications, because you really need to understand what you're doing with the web application before you start hacking it. And it's true, because if you don't understand the coffee shop, you don't understand the bank, how are you going to hack it, right? So think about, what is it doing? Is the data valuable? Is the information sensitive? So always think about the business logic first, okay? All right, recon findings that excite me. These are things that really get me excited. Woo. Swagger docs. Again, I'm a developer, so if I can get a hold of a Swagger doc, I'm going to be excited. GraphQL endpoints. GraphQL is so important. For people who don't know, it is kind of like a more refined version of API, where you can actually just search through like a database of information, and you can look for exact things. API, they just kind of spit everything at you. But if you're looking for something specific like users, passwords, and different things like this, you can find it directly through a query in the GraphQL. So like, for example, if you know the database, you could be like something like database users profile, or users password, and it will reveal just that specific information. And that's why GraphQL is so powerful, and that's why developers like it, because it's efficient, it's quicker. But the problem is it's dangerous. So if you're not securing that endpoint, you're in big trouble. Okay, mobile app APIs. I love mobile applications. I think the more times you can see the APIs being functional on a mobile application, the better. Admin functionality. Oh, if you have access to an admin panel, you have access to admin functionality in the APIs. Whew, oh man, you can do a lot of damage. You can do things that you really shouldn't be doing, right? Debug endpoints. Again, one thing with developers, they love debugging endpoints because they have so much functionality. They don't need to worry about anything. Everything kind of works the way they want it to. Okay. Export functions. I need to download something. Oh, can I download company information? Can I download data? Can I take this information, right? So the more information you find, the better. Internal references. If you can find internal knowledge bases, you can find internal documentation. This is golden, because really you can expose a company very quickly, and you can actually probably get some good money from bug bounties, because no one wants that internal information revealed to the public, right? That's why we call it internal. So think about these things when you're looking through these endpoints, because they really will save you a lot of time. All right, so common mistakes. Again, beginners think about scanning immediately. They just want to start scanning vulnerability scanners. They want to do FFUF. They want to start doing different things in Burp, which is okay. I get it. It's all right, but it's too quick. You need to manually look through everything. They run tools blindly. They're just gonna say, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna run intruder, woohoo, and they don't really know what they're looking for, really. They ignore the documentation. They're not really looking for that, right? So this is where things get kind of messy. So I would say, really look for things that are in the web application first before doing anything. Ignore business workflow. What is it actually going through? What is it actually happening? So I have this problem too. Sometimes I get a little too excited, but that's why you should spend like a good hour, maybe a day, just looking at the workflow. Sure, you're gonna maybe be a little slow at first, but I think it's better than rushing through the information, right? Skip endpoint mapping. Again, go through that sitemap on Kaido, Burp Suite. Gather all those endpoints so you understand what it's doing. Again, try to find the Swagger files. Try to grab everything that involves endpoints so you can research it later, really. The more research you do, the better. Okay, and professionals, they understand first. They understand what's going on, and then they test second. This is true. I think a lot of times when you look at professional bug bounty hunters, they're really more focused on how everything's working before they execute. I would say now it's also very hard with AI, because AI, you can really burn through that very quickly. But I think if you're trying to keep your skills sharp and you do things manually, this is still a good way to go. Okay. So let's go through my checklist. All right. So again, look for subdomains, identify API hosts, search for Swagger files, search for GraphQL. These are really telling information. Look for JavaScript files. You can look that in developer tools. Monitor traffic. Look kind of seeing how more or less what's flying through your Kaido, what's flying through your burp suite. So sometimes always capturing information first isn't always great. Just kind of start clicking on crap, see what it's doing, see what it's having, because a lot of times you'll find some weird information that you may not know about. Okay, identify auth. Kind of what kind of authentication are they using? Are they using JWT, session cookies, OAuth? Are they doing some extra stuff? Check it out. Understand workflows. Understand what's going inside the web applications. There's some special functionality you need to look for. And then finally, prioritize testing. So this is kind of not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's a much bigger list, but I think for beginners, this is a good place to start because you kind of get lay of the land, you kind of get more or less what's happening, stuff like this, right? So really, really important information. All right, so some key takeaways. Recon is not busy work. Government sector web applications. The man knows what he's doing. So, when I listen to that, I go, wow, this is coming from experience. Because, I'm also talking from my own experience. But when I listen to someone like him who, really has that like real world experience because of his work, stuff like this, like he knows what he's doing, right? So if he's telling me Recon is most important first, that's what we do. We should follow that logic, right? So remember, Recon is where findings begin, not where we start attacking. Okay, so again, find the attack surface, understand the application, build the inventory. Okay, remember asset management. The more you know, the better. Test intentionally. So when you're looking at your endpoints, you're not just randomly willy-nilly going through attacks. Okay, so that's exactly what we should be doing. All right. So any Q&A questions? I don't know. Let me kind of go back to Restream or wherever I'm at, see if anyone has any questions for me. Hey, Robbie. All right, thanks, Jesse. So sorry. Again, I'm not here to see me. Yo también. Oh, bueno, buenos días. Okay, so good. So, again, back to the stream. So, anyone have any questions for anything that was kind of unclear or unsure of? Again, I apologize. I'm not really a streamer anymore, so I don't pay attention to the chat the way I should. So, okay, I'm going to leave that open for a bit, but let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. So let's kind of go over to a website we're going to look at. So let's see, we're going to kind of come back to MS Edge, and we're going to come over here. So let's see here. All right, we have a restream. Oops. I don't need to see that. Okay, so we should be on the Integrity website. So here we are, we're on Integrity. So for people who don't know, Integrity is a website where you can do some bug bounty hunting. So this is really cool. I actually found this one right before my work, before the session. And this is great because it's brand new. There's only like one researcher. Last research was 5 days ago. So there's not a lot going on. So you can kind of more or less look at it. So let's do the initial recon of what this company is doing. So their name is Showpad. So this is our public vulnerability disclosure. So we invite people to come in and do their thing. Okay. So let's see, what do they want from us? I think this is really important, kind of looking through the engagement, right? I think a lot of times people are going to go, oh, I'm going to do bug bounty hunting. I'm going to bum, 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 bum. No, don't do that. Don't make life hard for yourself, okay? Do what the company asks you to do, and I think you'll be okay. All right, so let's see what they got. So we're just going to kind of look through this briefly. So they want you to respect community conduct, full terms and conditions, great. Respect the scope of the program. So this is really important when people are doing pen testing engagements. They don't think about what does the company want, right? So when we understand more what the company wants, the better, right? So always understand what's happening. Okay, so in scope, let's talk about what they want from in scope. This is going to tell us a lot of stuff. So this program is specifically designed for responsible disclosure of security vulnerabilities found on showpad.com. Okay, so we know that this endpoint is okay. Our main application is covered by a separate private invite-only bug bounty program. Okay, this VDP, however, provides a channel for the security community to report issues. Okay, so they actually have a couple separate endpoints, the one for private work and then one for public work. So this is important. So this is our endpoint. This is what we're going to play with. Okay, if you'd like to send feedback, please send it to us in this link. Okay, so we know more or less what they're looking for. Now let's look at add to scope because this is really important for people. Okay, so they don't want WordPress username disclosure. Okay. They don't want pre-auth account takeover. Okay, we don't want that. Typo squatting. Okay, we don't want that. Self-reflected cross-site scripting. Okay, we understand that. That's not an exploit for some people. Verbose messages, they don't care about that. CORS functionality, they don't care about that. Missing cookies, they don't care about that. Missing headers, they don't care about that. Cross-site request forgery with no or low impact, they don't care. Okay, presence of autocomplete attributes on web forms, they don't care about it. Reverse tab napping, they don't care about that. Bypass rate limits, they don't care about that. Best practices, violations with password complexities, expiration for use, they don't care. I don't know why they don't care about that, but that's okay. That's what the company wants, right? Clickjacking, they don't care about that. CSV injection, they don't care about that. Sessions not being invalidated. Okay, so they don't care about that. Tokens leaked to third parties, they don't care about consumption of APIs. Okay, so whatever. Anything related to email spoofing, they don't care. Content injection, okay. Username and email enumeration, okay. Email bombing, okay. HTTP request smuggling without any proven impact, okay. Homograph, okay. XML RPC, they don't care about. Banner grabbing, they don't care about. Not stripping metadata or files. Same site scripting, okay. Let's see what else we got. General information in case, let's see. Disclose misconfiguration of Google API keys. Okay, they don't want that. Host reader injection. Okay, so this alone, guys, if you're keeping a list of what's happening right now, this is what you should be looking at. You know, when you're going through your bug bounty, this is part of your asset inventory. Because if you're looking through all these things and you're trying to attack all this, you're doing it wrong because they don't want you to do that. So always really look at what you're doing first before going in and checking everything out. Okay. So for us, we're not going to actually look for any vulnerabilities, but we're going to develop our asset inventory. Okay. General, in case a reported vulnerability was known to the company, it will be flagged as a duplicate. Okay, we know that. Okay, theoretical security, okay, not going to worry about it. Spam, DDoS, vulnerabilities only work. Attacks requiring physical access, okay. Recently discovered 0 days. Reports that say they're out of date, okay. So these are just really good information to think about. And then of course they have their information for mobile application security as well. So they're pretty thorough about what they want. They just pretty much want you to kind of more or less find really high impact vulnerabilities. They're not really looking for anything too severe, right? So what we'll do is we're just going to kind of look at the website and we're just going to do some asset inventory, okay? So let's just go ahead and copy that. Yes, I understand. We're going to copy it. I understand the responsibility. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and switch over to my virtual machine. So remember, when you're doing bug bounty hunting, you should always work on a virtual machine. Don't do any work on a private machine or your host machine because it's dangerous. Okay. So as you see, I already have Kaido pulled up because I really like Kaido, and for some reason my burp suite's kind of acting dumb. So I'm not going to use like any special certificates for like Mozilla. I'm just going to pull up the Chromium browser that Kaido brings up. So we're going to pull up the website. So it should be something like showpad.com. So let's grab that again. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so let's go ahead and access that. So our biggest thing here, one thing I would really like to also talk about is how we can kind of keep ourselves from seeing like a load of traffic, right? So sometimes when we're looking at websites, it'll come up with a lot of traffic, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute because if you can see, it took forever for this website to come back to me, probably because it's doing a lot of ad tracking, affiliate tracking, all this crap. So let's kind of go through our HTTP requests and let's look at that. So look at that. You can see a ton of stuff. Next image, JS, blah, blah, blah. A lot of crap. You know, this is crap that we don't really need. So this is where we kind of say, hey, we need to look at our scope. So I want you to take your website and I want you to add it to your scope. So actually, let's talk about it. Let's see. Show scope. So we're just going to call it show scope. And we're going to talk about this is what's in scope. Okay. So when I do this, now it should clean up a lot of that HTTP request. So what I'll do is I'm just going to click out of this and delete everything. So now when we are going through our work, we're only going to see stuff from Showpad. We're not going to see affiliate links. We're not going to see anything else. And this is what we want, because when you're running through engagements and you see huge lists of requests, it's going to burn you out. It's going to stress you out. So last thing we want to do is kind of scare people away from bug bounty hunting, because it's not so scary, but you need to understand why we're doing it, right? So when we're doing this responsibly, this is a good way to do it. Okay, so let's see what we got. Let's see, we're going to go through our sitemap, and we're just going to kind of more or less see what's going on. So we see like some stuff already, a lot of junk though. So let's kind of delete all that. Let's just kind of go through it again. So let's just kind of resolve it. And here you go. We see a few things. So we can probably delete all of this, like Google Analytics. I don't want it. So I could probably delete it. I'm not too sure how, but my main goal here is the showpad. So we can look at showpad. We can see some of the information here. We see like next files, images, favicons, different things. So as we go through this, you start to see that this is built. And actually, it's very cool because sometimes when you're like not thinking about it, it kind of makes a big mess. Okay, so again, we see like a little bit more cleaner information. This is more related to the website. So again, let's just kind of look through what they're doing. So we see right away it's called Showpad. So this says the world relies on what you sell. You can rely on Showpad. So these are medical devices that save lives. So right away, when you're thinking about this, medical devices, this is more my specialty because I've worked in healthcare for about 10 years. So the first thing you should really think about is safety of what you're doing because these are medical devices. So if you're bringing down this website, yeah, no wonder they're going to tell you don't do it because they're trying to say, hey, we have things that we need to do. And if you bring down our website, it's going to kill our business because it's going to hurt our clients. So when you're thinking about your industry, if you're looking at medical devices, you have to be very careful. Healthcare staff very careful because these types of things are very fragile. Okay, so think about that very carefully when you're going through those endpoints. Okay, so let's go through that. So we'll go down a little bit. So we see like a requested demo. We kind of see a few things. We see, okay, hey, here's some information about the company, kind of different things. Kind of cool. AI engineered for the fast lane. I don't know what that means, but we're going to look through that in a minute. We can look, they have some voice stuff. Okay, sales readiness. You can kind of see more or less what they're doing. So you see kind of their blog, some of the features that they're doing. Let's see, they're talking about AI teams. So this is really interesting. So we can start to see that they're kind of reliant on using AI in their medical devices. They have a lot of blogs they want to talk about from different companies, different industries, stuff like this. You want to field sellers, looking for different people, marketers, stuff like this. So again, there's quite a bit of functionality in this website actually. So you can start to see a lot of things. So you can see more things like more resellers, more guides. Here's some useful guide information, right? So this is really important to receive a power. No, do a demo. I bet you $10. I'm gonna have to enter my email, and I bet you $10. You can always test that, right? So again, and then here's kind of more or less their link tree. So you can kind of see where the different links are, what are the directories, stuff like this. So very, very useful information. And this is just my observation, right? We're not messing around with endpoints yet. We're not really doing anything. We're kind of more or less looking, right? And then of course you see a login functionality. They have a showpad and then whatever this is. I bet you this is their flagship that they're not asking us to do. So when you see this, this is not an invitation to attack it, right? They want you to focus on showpad. So again, when you're doing a recon, focus on what they tell you. Okay, so let's click on platform. Okay, so this is kind of like a scrolly website. So you'll more or less kind of go through each section. You can kind of build more or less what they're doing. You can look at their marketing. And this is important, kind of just going through their website. So you see showpad for marketing. So kind of see more or less what they're doing, what's happening. You kind of go through the website a little bit. And again, when you're going to the website, this is also building your sitemap. So think about it when you're just doing it because it looks boring. It's not very fun. And depending on the website, it's probably very slow because, again, people are using a bunch of trackers and Google Analytics and all that stuff. So it matters. When you're doing like a web application challenge from like a talent site, they're not going to have trackers. So it's going to be much quicker. But when you're kind of going through these, you kind of want to see more or less what they're doing, right? So obviously it takes a while, but I would say this is why we do it. The slower you are, the more proficient you are, the better, right? So they're just kind of pitching a lot of info. So it's good. We're kind of seeing more or less what they're doing. Now, do we need to know all this information? No. But, we need to know more or less what the functionality is that we're doing with. Okay. Manufacturing companies. So they're kind of focused on that. Okay, let's look at the customers. Let's see what they have going on here. So customers, okay, so this is something that can be useful because this is more front facing for us, right? So we can see they have like some information, some valuable resources, blogs, stuff like this. Customer stories, this is great. Maybe you can come in here, look at maybe one of these blogs, and maybe you can leave a comment. If you can, that's great for attacking, right? Share an article. You know, these also can be things. If you look at these like share endpoints, sometimes you can more or less manipulate them and do some scripting, stuff like this. So kind of clicking on those things, they may not mean much, but that'll pop up with an API endpoint later, right? So nothing really important here. Again, we see some blogs, kind of go back, see if this is the same thing. Maybe see if there's any way to leave a comment. You know, that's the biggest thing. When you're looking through things, you want to see if you can find a way to leave a comment or leave information behind so you can check for cross-site scripting, right? So again, look at the functionality. What is it doing? What is our ability? What can we do, right? So this is really cool. All right, so not too bad. So this is kind of boring. Events, webinars. Can we register for events? Let's check. You can probably find some telling information. You can register. You can probably enter information. So this is really powerful. So you can probably do some cross-site scripting. When you look at the two things that you think of, request a demo, register, that means you're inputting information, right? So that means that this could be an entry point into the application, right? So just think about that. Your partner program. What do they have here? Is there some functionality that we can look at, right? So it's very interesting information. Okay, so something you can think about. Now, something that caught my eye right away. Look at this. They have a developer portal. What is that? I'm going to click on it because they really shouldn't be developing that. That should be kind of an internal resource, right? So if we go back, holy crap. What happened? Look at this. I'm going to take it like a screenshot because this is something that may be important for me, right? Because look at it. You found the API docs. What? Oh man, did I find like the Swagger files? Oh my God, look at that. So for anyone who's watching my stream right now, we just found the API documentation. This is part of the Recon, right? This is why we take time, because this company more or less said, it's okay. Look at my information. Is that great? Maybe no, but it's very dangerous because now we get to see kind of the functionality. Now, is it going to give me a lot of functionality? I don't know. Let's look. So there's a API testing. Let's look at that. This is going to tell us a lot of information. So we see our endpoint is docs, APIs, concepts, testing. Okay, so this is really important for us. So again, we are kind of looking for references, API versions. Okay, so they're openly telling us they may have V1, V2. Okay, this is very important. So when looking at that, this is huge because now we're starting to see information, right? They're kind of telling us our troubleshooting steps, stuff like this. So let's see if they have like API reference. So I'm not going to go to authentication yet, but I want to see what it is that they have, right? Why are they revealing API documentation? This is something that I think is really important. Well, this is awkward. We forgot to redirect. Okay, so that's good. So maybe they don't have that. So let's go back to show API. So again, showpad. Don't go into the other application because they didn't tell you to do that. So, but this is important because if we can find information here, this is where we go. Wow. So again, they have version 3, they have version 4. Let's see. So we looked at API testing. Let's see. What about reference? Well, that sometimes you should check different endpoints because sometimes the endpoints don't work on certain parts of the website. So if you notice when I went to reference last time, I went, oops, awkward. But here we go. Now I have V1 or V4 or V3. So it's probably pretty secure. But let's kind of look at V3. Let's see what they have there. So this will tell us some good information, more or less. So all right. So it's pretty slow. So while we're doing that, let's kind of see what other information they have. So again, we have the developer portal. They have an academy. That's kind of cool. They have a bunch of different things. So again, when you look at like this developer portal, it's good to kind of just see what's there because, you can find stuff. Now, again, this website's super slow. So, that's why, when they say your enumeration process, it's a slow process because it can take a couple hours, a couple minutes, stuff like this. Okay, so we're going to give it a second to kind of catch up, see if anything changes. So let's check. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So again, we have access to ShowPad, custom API, workflows, connect systems. Okay. Is this done yet? Still loading. Okay, it's kind of crappy, but it's okay. It's okay, so we have all this information. Yeah, nothing too crazy. You can make webhook documentation. You have questions about documentation. What's new? What's the API provisioning change? So they have channel logs. This is great. You can look back at this and see what's been updated, what's not been updated. That's also great. Okay, so here's some show API endpoint. So, all right, so let's see. We have the production server. This is bad. This is the base URL. So they're saying, hey, this is our production server. This is the information that we can find. HTTPS subdomain showpad.biz version 3. Okay, so maybe you can change that to version 2. You never know if they didn't clean it up. It's okay. Here's the authentication. So this is also very important. We look back at authentication. So we see they use OAuth 2.0. So this is important, right? So when we're going through that, we say, oh my God, this is interesting. So again, kind of look back, see why they're doing this. Why is this happening? So this is really, really good. So we see some very, very telling information. And this is why we're doing this, because now we are looking at something valuable, right? So, think about that. So don't stress if it looks a little intimidating, because this is the point. This is what we want to look at. Why this is happening, stuff like this, right? So this is good. So don't be intimidated. This is what we want. So here we go. So we have password OAuth flow. So they say, okay, you need a token URL. So your customer, probably your customer ID, customer name, whatever it is that they used. Showpad biz API v3 OAuth 2 token. Okay. Authorization code OAuth flow. Okay. Our OAuth URL. So again, same thing. You're using that different flow token URL. Here's your bearer auth. You can look at this too. So this is the bearer token to identify the current request. Please check this page for more in-depth explanation of the Showpad authentication. Okay. Provide your bearer token in the authorization header when making requests to protected resources. Okay, so again, you get the example, authorization bearer 123. So everyone gets a bearer token. So it's very important, very telling, right? So this is great. So more or less, you can look at the different assets. Look, they give you the inventory list here. I didn't find this microfile. You can also export this. You can probably put this here in Postman and you can download it. Look at the assets. Here's all these endpoints: asset JSON, asset ID, asset unlink, link, all this stuff. Channels. Look at the different channels they have. So here, we're just clicking on information. We're not attacking, but we're looking more or less. We're doing comments. This is what we want, right? We want to create a comment somewhere. We can maybe send some cross-site scripting, different attacks, whatever we can. So this is why it's good to look at these documentations. Divide permissions. What does that mean exactly? So we need to look at that. Divisions, exports. What information can I export? This is what we talked about earlier, right? So I can export user information. I can export user groups. This is bad, actually. So shared space, events, divisions, channels. So there's a ton of information here in exports. Generics, whatever random crap. So nothing important here. Recommendations. Okay, tags, whatever they got there. Tickets. You got some ticket information that's useful. User groups. Okay, now we can look at user groups. Find user groups inside of the API. Permissions. Okay, you got user permissions. What can users do and not do, especially inside their group? That's good for least privilege. Users. Okay, users.json, users count, user description, user invite, user me. This is probably my profile. The recommendations, user groups, JSON, division, channels, email preferences, extensions. Okay, so not too bad. There's nothing too serious in the user endpoints. But again, look at this, guys. I'm able to find a ton of information without doing much, right? And if I really wanted to, I could probably, again, export that. So I can export the original. I can do the bundle. Look at that. Now I have documentation in JSON. Okay. I have bundled references. So now I can probably take this and I can probably put it in Kaido, Burp Suite, wherever, or Postman. And now I have all this information, right? So This is why when you're doing your enumeration, it's important. This may look boring to you, may be dumb, but this right here tells us a lot of information. So don't neglect looking, because right here we found good information. Is it perfect? No, but it gives us something. It gives us information. Okay. So now we can go back, look at connect systems, automatic workflows, different things. Nothing too interesting here. Okay. Anything else? Pricing. Okay. So we're not going to interact with this too much. Let's just kind of see what the requested demo is. See what it is that it's doing. If it works, I don't know. The endpoint might be dead. So you can see that. So if I click on that endpoint, it doesn't work. It's dead. Okay. So this is okay. There we go. It's kind of slow. All right. So here's a form. I can send information. So again, think about what you're doing. Okay, I can create some fake data, and this will help us, right? So again, it's useful. Again, unless you're ready to attack, don't attack yet. Just kind of more or less kind of see what it's doing. Become a partner. How do I become a partner? Join the partner program. Okay, so submit what? Again, these websites are kind of janky. They don't give out information. Okay, more user information. Maybe you can throw something inside the message information. Okay, so as you do that, again, let's go back to Kaido. Let's go see what we got going on here. So now our sitemap should be growing. So we can go back to Showpad, and look at that. Look at all this information. You keep all that, and you can even probably find like you can export that data, right? So again, this is where we're looking at here. This is what we want. Now, did we find? I wonder if it actually saved the APIs. I don't know. Maybe not. That's something that we would have to look at. But more or less, you can see what's in here. You can look at that WordPress content. You can see this is a WordPress site, videos, favicon information, images, request demos, pricing. All this is like super telling information. In Next, what is this? Is this Next.js, Node.js? You learn these more syntax more or less, so you know more or less what kind of application you need to enumerate and what kind of tools you need to do this. So it's really useful, guys. So hopefully this kind of gives you some insight about enumeration. Look at that, the developer showpad. Look at that. Let's look at that. So again, it shows you the assets. Oh my God, look at all this information. I can look at this and I can say, okay, I can track this endpoint. I can attack this thing. I can look at this picture. I can go enumerate it. Here's my 404 illustration. They want to look nice. Documentation. Here's our APIs. Look at that. I found all their API documentation right here. Look at all this information. V3, testing. We can look at Open API. Again, we talked about Open API. Look what I found. So guys, I literally just unraveled this company's website. And no, nothing really extraordinary happened. I didn't make it enough to do a VDP submission. But I probably can now look at this and go, okay, I'm going to go look at this, see what I can find, and go attack it, right? So guys, hopefully this information kind of makes sense for you. It's really useful. It's really powerful. So the more you are willing to look at information, enumerate the information, the better off you're going to be. It's boring. It's slow. This is not a great process. But, once you have it, you're going to be good. Okay? So guys, this is going to be it for my stream. Does anyone have any questions for me? I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to ask a question, see if there's anything that you want to tell me, stuff like this. So chat is open, so don't be shy. Say hi. Sorry if I'm drinking water. It's hot today. Also, I probably should go back and check the scope, because I wonder if the API testing stuff is out of scope. If not, maybe I can check it out. Maybe I can send some information like, hey, you guys would disclose your API endpoints, but let's check. So we'll see. Okay, so I don't see anyone texting. I don't see anyone chatting. So I think we're kind of here at the end. So guys, I'm sorry I didn't really